Beware, spoiler phobes! You have stumbled into A Storm of Spoilers, a podcast currently covering HBO's A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, a series returning us to Westeros decades before Jon Snow and the Good Boy Ghost, and decades after the Incest Dragon War. This podcast is split into two sections. In the first calm section, Neil and I will cover the premiere episode of the first season of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, titled The Hedge Knight, which is also the title of the novella this season is based on. In the second Storm section, Neil will use his knowledge of that George R.R. Martin source text to discuss what is coming for Sir Dunk the Tall and his bald-headed squire. We're not ruining, we're enriching.
The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. The story we agree to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie. But what do we have left once we abandon the lie? Chaos. A gaping pit waiting to swallow us all. Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder.
Why, hello again. I'm Dave Gonzalez, and I have not read any of the books in George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series.
And I'm Neil Miller, and I've read all of those books, including The Hedge Knight, a short story by George R.R. Martin.
And welcome back to A Storm of Spoilers, Westeros edition, of course. Just a reminder, we are going to be covering every episode of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms here on A Storm of Spoilers, so join us for new episodes every Monday in the afternoons of those Monday. Neil and I have to process, sleep off all of our mead. It's been a rough tourney on Sunday nights, so we have to, get up, start the day anew.
Lots of dancing.
Absolutely. If you would like to get in touch with the show, you could email us at stormofspoilers@gmail.com. Please continue to send us your pitches for corners as we get deeper into the show. Only 6 episodes, so we're going to rapidly develop those corners as we go. But love hearing your input. We also love it when you review us on the Apple Podcasts app or Spotify. If you leave us a 5-star rating, you could say whatever you want. Like this review from Mary says, "Love this podcast. Dave and Neil keep things accessible to diehard fans, casuals, and even people who aren't watching the show they are covering, but want to hear about the lore." Oh boy, what a season for Mary and people who want those things from this podcast, because I do love learning about the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, especially at this level. I'm getting ahead of myself. We are now both at youtube.com/@astormofspoilers and youtube.com/@Dave and Neil. That's Da7e and Neil. We are splitting our YouTube presence to be more specific to what you are looking for. Right now, these episodes are going up in both places, but make sure you are subscribed to A Storm of Spoilers, as eventually these episodes will only show up there. If you want to get content through that other YouTube channel and our Patreon, make sure to head to patreon.com/Da7e and Neil for more of Neil and I talking about television shows, giving you some behind-the-scenes stories about movies we love, and a Slack that everyone can enjoy talking about as the social network internet continues to get worse and worse like a watery dunk poop. Plus, access bonus content from previous seasons of A Storm of Spoilers. That includes our Game of Thrones era, our Lost era, all of those things you could find in our back catalog, but only subscribe at patreon.com/Dave and Neil. If you love the NBC series Hannibal that was on almost 10 years ago now, we are currently doing a rewatch of that. So if you join our Patreon at the highest level, that's of course the small council level for you Martin heads out there, you get access to our Eat the Rude podcast where we cover every episode of Hannibal as we're re-watching it. All right, that's enough selling you on other places to hear this conversation. You obviously came here to hear us talk about returning to Westeros. Neil, what happened this week in the Seven Kingdoms?
Well, Dave, here's what happened this week. Dunk buries his mentor, Sir Arlen, takes a shit, has a nice meal, meets a bald child, then heads off to a tourney at Ashford, where he struggles to gain entry in the tourney due to lack of funds and lack of clout. But along the way, he meets new friends, Fossilway apples and dancing Baratheon stags, some of whom may be helpful in the days to come. Plus, the little bald boy just won't go away, but may prove useful as he knows how to do laundry, cook fish, and interpret the luck of witnessing a falling star. So we have now met Sir Duncan the Tall. He will eventually be known. And we're off on our little adventure here. And I have a question for you, Dave. An opening question.
Absolutely.
Does it feel like we're back in Westeros? Because as the first few minutes of this episode very clearly illustrate, we're off to a different tone than, say, House of the Dragon, for sure. But do you feel like we're back in George's world?
I think so. So a lot of what really attracted me to the first season of Game of Thrones is we're spending a lot of time with Robert Baratheon, just like being absolutely bored with the business of running the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a lot of the feeling that I got here as Game of Thrones got bigger. And right from the start, from House of the Dragon, we were in very, very fancy places with political intrigue, but also dragons. And as the series got more budget to execute those things, and luckily for them and their narrative, as magic returned to the world after a much different shooting star than the one we get at the end of this episode, it gave way to more and more dragons. We got less and less of these smaller it's sort of stories within the world. You would eventually get Podrick does something fun and we get a little peek at something, but the story quickly became either interested in magic or specifically who was going to sit on the Iron Throne. So I do enjoy going back to this because I think this has a key aspect to it that Game of Thrones was unable to sort of maximize on because of the era in which it debuted. And I think House of the Dragon is difficult to execute because there's so many dragons. But like, remember when we were covering House of the Dragon season 2 on Trial by Content, and I was like, this sort of like dragon picking a rider scene would be a great theme park attraction, where you just like walk up and a big dragon head comes out and whoops, you get all burned. That would be great because I think there are certain parts of a fantasy story where I do feel good about the story if I want to live there. I haven't read any of the books by George R.R. Martin, but my understanding is he describes food very in depth at certain times. And that would make me, at least it's from a story building standpoint, be like, oh, cool. Wouldn't it be fun to like have those foods? I think it's difficult in this time period because he's also telling like a, fantasy based history of actual Europe. And like, there aren't a lot of like great things. Do I want to live in that time period actually as a person? No, I want to live in the fantasy version of that time period. So far, Night of the Seven Kingdoms is getting me that because of its like tourney setting and it's sort of light hand so far with a lot of the tits and dragons we've come to expect from Game of Thrones. I think it's really actually more attractive as a fantasy than some of the Game of Thrones stories I've seen so far because it's not going to be epic, but what it's missing so far in like the epic sense of the other Song of Ice and Fire stories, it's giving me like really great characters right off the jump. There isn't anybody I dislike or that I like despite myself, like would frequently happen in Game of Thrones, where I'd find myself like rooting for a bad guy. Big Littlefinger fan here, even though in theory, fuck that guy. So I am having a great time so far with this. I have a question back for you, Neil.
Sure.
Why is it in our preview episode nobody told me Dunk was lying about being a knight?
Is he though?
It seems like it because he describes that he was knighted and the only one that saw him was a bird, and that describes him pooping after seemingly deciding he's going to be a knight. And he's like, this sword is fits as good in my hand as it ever did in his. Why wouldn't I be? Um, so I guess is this something that is going? Is this? I guess. Can I not be asking you this in the calm, or was there a very specific reason that you wanted me to make this discovery on my own?
Here's the thing. There's no way to know, because there's no, as far as I can tell, having read the book, we just kind of have to take Dunk's word for it, because there obviously there were no witnesses to this, and there's no way to confirm or deny what happened. We never get a direct scene. Like, what's great about it is the way this episode opens is exactly like word for word the way the book opens. And that's where we start the story, with him burying Sir Arlen. So we don't actually see what happens right before Sir Arlen dies. And it does look like this show is going to give us more flashbacks. So I think it's within the realm of possibility that the show may answer this question. But I also think it's one of the more fun things about Sir Duncan's story is that we never really know if he's telling the truth about this. And ultimately, I don't know if it matters, right? Because obviously we're on this journey where he's going to become this legendary knight. I mean, in the behind the scenes featurettes, they've already called back to the scene in Game of Thrones where Joffrey cites him in the Kingsguard book, and he's like, 4 pages for Sir Duncan the Tall. He must have been a great man. And Jamie's like, yeah, apparently. So, you know, whether he's lying or not, it's kind of one of those things where it may not matter so much, but I don't think there's a hard and fast answer either way that I can point to. And I think that's kind of the fun part about it. So I've always, as a book reader, I always kind of believed him. Like, I always kind of believed. Then again, I will say that in some of the flashbacks that we see so far, Sir Arlen is being portrayed a little bit more of a dick than I thought he was in the books. So that's kind of fun. I'm very, very interested, because one of the things as a book reader that I was most curious about is how are they going to extend this story, right? It's a novella. It's not a particularly long book. And even making it 6 episodes feels like you got to kind of stretch it out, right? Because it's all sort of centered around this tourney. And it does appear as if flashbacks are going to be a big part of it. And I think that filling in those parts of Dunk's story with the flashbacks is going to be really interesting. And I am curious to see how they fill in Sir Arlen's character in ways that maybe we didn't get from the novella. And I kind of hope they don't address this. Like, I like this as a forever mystery about Duncan. And you know, the whole point is that whether he was knighted or not, he is destined to be a pretty great knight.
I at first was very mad because I think the show is taking a pretty, or at least the first time I watched it, I thought the show was taking a pretty clear stance that he had not been knighted, and he was sort of like making it up as a way to maybe like find his fortune. And that's why it made me mad, is because I was looking forward to seeing what sort of honor a hedge knight has if he is not a sellsword. Then what is the life of a hedge knight that is sort of like honor based? I'm psyched we're getting the flashbacks. I'm pretty psyched that it looks like a lot of that might be brought about by his relationship to Egg, and sort of like correcting how to treat a squire in how he was treated. Or maybe not. Maybe he does think he's treated fairly. That is one of the first things he says at the graveside of Sir Arlen. So I'm looking forward to seeing more Arlen and to kind of figuring out what drives these people. Because Dunk's reading as a good person, and I'm on his side as sort of like the large buffoon, but he's also reading like doesn't know a lot of the stuff I would assume a knight knows.
Sure.
Or maybe is just playing off slow and is around people who are trying to take advantage of him. It's hard to tell at this point.
Yeah.
But well, it is interesting that he isn't. Yeah, go ahead.
I think there are 2 things that are important there. One is that Dunk is a little slow. I mean, Hedge Knights are a little rough around the edges. I think as we'll discover, he's not. Hedge Knights are not, and especially the way Dunk came up with Sir Arlen, they were traveling around. They weren't necessarily. He wasn't trained in a castle, right? Like Sir Lionel. He sort of mentions this as Sir Lionel. And the other thing is that one of the core themes of this first season, especially, is going to be, what does it really mean to be a good knight? You know, what does it mean to be a true knight of Westeros and truly have honor? And what separates a knight from a brigand or a sellsword? And who gets to have that honor, and is it only reserved for the privileged few? And or can someone like Sir Duncan, who clearly doesn't come from a very privileged background, can he rise to that station just through sheer force of wanting it bad enough? You know,
I love the idea of bootstrapping. I just want to see what sort of procedures, if you're using a reputation based system to live by. I want to see more of those procedures, and I'm excited to be starting this from zero from Dunk.
Sure.
I assumed I was gonna at least have an oath or something, but it seems like he's just gonna protect the weak and, you know, excuse me, sir, stop that raping. That's
yeah, you know,
he's
just be a good guy
best.
so far is like his code, which, you know, is better than a lot of knights, especially some of the ones we've met in Game of Thrones. So I think that's important. Here we have a raven from Phelan that I think is important to address up top as well, because I think a lot of folks are going to watch this episode as fans of Game of Thrones, especially having gone through the entire roller coaster experience of Game of Thrones' tones all the way to the end. And our most recent Game of Thrones thing is House of the Dragon, which is a very serious, intense, conflict between family members, essentially. But this one's got a little bit different tone. And Phelan points this out. He says, is it just me, or is the softer tone, shorter runtime, and pedestrian level stakes giving the show a Westerosi sitcom kind of vibe? I dig it, but it hits different. And I do think that this is illustrated most in the hard cut from the rising Game of Thrones theme to Dunk taking a watery shit by a tree. Very early on, the show very much calling its shot that this is much more of a comedy, I guess. So how do you feel about the general tone that it's setting here? That it's a little silly.
I think I like it. I think especially in this first episode, going that hard on being like we're a different thing is very important. Going forward, though, here's the things I really like about it. We're here for a short time, so everybody's got to have a defining characteristic. The head of games, I think, is a great example of this, who just has way too much mucus, constantly has to be spitting, is kind of a bullshitter, is like there to remind us with like the city people think about themselves and these sort of like entertainments. And he's there for a quick time, not like a good time. We don't have to come back to that character for me to have gotten sort of a full character out of those moments, which I think using something like the constant spitting is like a character trait that works both as like world building, but also to give us the good type of prejudice where we're ready to meet a character as if that character's lived an entire life outside of that one scene. Sometimes you need to use like a shorthand. A bad example of that is using a really stereotypical accent. A good example of that, I think, is, you know, how did people deal with mucus in the Middle Ages? Of course, you'd have like a spit cup. Like, I don't know. Neil, you've had some sinus problems recently. I'm sure the Middle Ages would have been very tough to you.
Yeah, exactly.
You would have been like Neil, the guy who's always sniffing and spitting. I don't know what's up with that House Miller, man.
I would have been this guy. And I would have been just as cranky back then because, you know, they didn't have good drugs back then.
Right. And then I think that's going to work really to its advantage because we could go through a whole bunch of common characters and allow them to sort of be fleshed out with some very interesting details at the side that we're just not going to deal with because we have this brisker pace. And I also think this episode does a great job of showing what some freedom in the edit is doing, or allowing a punchline to be an edit-based punchline, especially with Sir Arlen's slaps and the shitting. But post-production shenanigans really wasn't something that Game of Thrones executed a lot. There was, of course, our beloved poops and scrubs montage to like kick off a season. But that it used to be like a little flourish. It'll be interesting to see, especially with being able to deploy flashbacks, which is usually something these shows don't do very regularly, to not only deploy flashbacks to sort of build character, but to deploy flashbacks to show an irony and make a humorous moment is just a tool that is now in the show's toolbox that I don't think was in the previous iterations toolbox. These are all things, by the way, that are easier to manifest in a show with a single location.
Right.
So that's something I'm not wanting these from the other shows, because the other shows have other things in their mind, specifically, where everybody is, how many armies are loyal to those people. If you strip away those other things that I have to worry about, so far this episode is showing that Night of the Seven Kingdoms can fill in that space with a lot of world building that I assume is in the novels, if not in this specific novella, but in the novels around the story I've already seen.
Yeah, and I think
I love it.
I think it works really well to accomplish what this show is going for, which is to really build out the ground level world, to bring us closer to the sort of the small folk, and to get us really sort of embedded in this tourney atmosphere, which I think is going to be important. And I like the way this episode comes out and has this very unique tone to it, but is also sort of, has its gross moments. We get some fun, weird Game of Thrones level nudity in this. Like it's giving us, signaling to us that we are watching a Game of Thrones show. It is a little bit more fun, but as we will, we'll break down in the storm, the upcoming this season on trailer. This story does get a little more serious as we go along, and there will be more violent and more intense stakes that are added to this whole situation as the tourney gets going. But I do really enjoy that. It feels, I describe it as like a leisurely pace, and that's a really good way to have us enter this world of Sir Duncan, because he's sort of a leisurely guy, and his his journey is just beginning. And I think it's important nailing the characterization, and I think they even talked about this in some of the behind the scenes, which is like not only nailing the characterization but nailing the casting of both Dunk and Egg was a huge piece for this show. And I think that the fact that this first episode was kind of slow but is really focused on introducing these characters and introducing their relationship and allowing their chemistry to sort of simmer a little bit is really good, and has really done a good job of introducing them. And I also really like, from a production design standpoint, lots of practical stuff. I mean, this is the other benefit of having a pretty much single location show. Obviously, some of the flashbacks look like they're going to be in different locations, but the fact that this tourney all takes place here at Ashford Meadow means that they were able to build these things, right? And that's everything from the lists to this bridge that they built to the tents. I mean, the Baratheon tent alone, I think, is one of the coolest, little practical things that they've built so far. And I think that really does take me back. And I think I mentioned this last week in our preview episode, that we're going to get a lot of like season 1 Game of Thrones vibes from this. And there is not as much of the who is going to inherit the throne, right, in this story. But there is, there are, again, plenty of blondes on their way. But there are going to be plenty of things that feel like they're big stakes for little people, or small folk in this world. And I like that. And I like that their world feels very tactile because they were able to build so much of it. And I think that allows them, that level of realism that they're able to accomplish in the production design allows them to play a little bit with the tone, and allows them to get away with this hard cut to Dunk shitting by a tree and just being silly. So I think it works really well.
I am very excited and fearing for the props department when they were like, oh yeah, the way this tournament works is like you kind of ransom your gear all the way up the ladder. So like already the shield and sword from Sir Arlen, like A+ level props. The texture on the shields, insane. I can't wait for him to beat people with fancier armor and start leveling up like the Mandalorian season 1, where he's just slowly getting more Beskar pieces until he's finally. Sure. I have to assume through the foreshadowing that we've gotten that he won't defeat a knight with a belt until the penultimate episode.
Yeah, I mean,
and then he finally gets his belt going into the finale.
I will say that, we haven't seen any of these rich guys' armor yet. We did see, the Fossaways. They're obviously a house
red apple
with a little bit of money. That's a pretty cool tunic that Sir Raymond's got on with a big red apple on it. And I think that is one of the things I'm very excited about, especially knowing that we're going to be in this tourney for pretty much the entire season, is that each house in this time, especially this time where there isn't a whole lot of war going on, and they're sitting around trying to express themselves as rich houses. This is one of the ways they do it, through their armor and the way they present themselves at tourneys. So I actually think that's, from a props department standpoint, probably one of the more fun things to work on, is like, how do we make all of these armors unique and cool? Like, I can't wait to see what Sir Lionel's armor looks like. The Laughing Storm, right? I mean, this is our first real, like, eccentric rich guy that we're meeting, and he's quite a lot of fun. And I was very excited, as a book reader, to meet the Laughing Storm. How are you feeling about the Laughing Storm, Dave? The dancing Jack Sparrowy eccentric Baratheon of his time.
I am excited to be able to talk about storms without talking about the Greyjoys. What a benefit for somebody whose podcast is called The Storm of Spoilers, based on The Storm of Swords, a book that was released 20 years ago at this point. More than that. So Laughing Storm, love it. Daniel Ings absolutely cooking with this energy for this gentleman. I was like, oh man, who would have been great? This is like an Ex Machina Pedro Pascal performance. And I had to remind myself that, like, Oscar Isaac performance. And I'm like, that they probably couldn't get Oscar Isaacs to come in and do his exact same sort of bisexual dance performance. But Daniel Ings is doing a great job of it, and also bringing the Oscar Isaacs Dune facial hair. So I'm loving this sort of swap. But yeah, I don't know, the coolest Baratheon I've met in a while. Apologies to Gendry. But I...
Poor Gendry. This guy makes Gendry look like a charisma vacuum, unfortunately.
He is a charisma vacuum compared to Gendry. I don't think this guy could run as far for his consistent time period.
That's
but
true. He's way too drunk.
He doesn't need to. I like this as our first sort of, in this series, in-depth interaction with a lord, because he has a menace, but only because I know the power that lords have in this world. And therefore everybody, you know, in his tent knows the power that he has. But that may had me entering this and like with him sort of picking Dunk out of the crowd and being like, you know, people punch tall guys more than short people. I was like, oh no, Dunk, run away. Because I'm so used to just Lord being asshole, just in Game of Thrones. It's like the Lord of all the houses are just huge assholes. But I think so far, this Baratheon seems to be more trapped in his role than necessarily malicious about torturing his underlings. He seems like brave. He's obviously like, if my ancestors could brave the storm, so could I brave the storm. So I appreciate that. And he's obviously, you know, participating in these tournaments, so he's not like a slouch lord. But also, just in terms of visual language, the fact that he hits his head with his crown as he's leaving the tent and Dunk keeps hitting his head makes me think that these two have more emotionally in common going forward. So the TV watcher in me is like, this guy is the guy that is going to end up vouching for Dunk.
Okay. This is an important question, which is who among some of these lords will be friendly to Dunk or foe to Dunk by the end of this.
It seems like Dunk's willingness to play along with the foot stomping dance and to actually, you know, beat the Lord showed like some sort of interest. But then again, he was super drunk, so he wasn't gonna do, I don't know, a compulsive Joffrey and just be like, now you're my fool or some, you know, idiot Lord shit. So I do appreciate that he's not being mean about it. And I kind of, I don't know, he's my favorite so far. He's my favorite besides obviously Dunk and Egg being our protagonists. But I really like this guy. He's giving me the exact opposite vibes as asshole Dondarrion in this episode.
Sure. And I do think that we've come a long way, because this guy is only a few generations removed from the Baratheon that we saw in House of the Dragon, who let Prince Jacaerys get chomped right outside of Storm's End. So like that was like, this guy's like, I don't know, grandfather maybe, right? Because that was like 100 years ago, 80 years ago.
Right.
So like this guy, far better party thrower than that Baratheon.
You definitely see how Bobby B comes along through here.
Sure.
I can't wait.
Yes, this guy is more of a you know, Bobby B in a few levels of the family tree.
I mean, I can't wait till we get a Robert's Rebellion. Apparently, they're considering maybe doing it as like a stage show, I've heard now.
Oh, interesting.
But whenever that gets adapted, I can't wait. I feel like I've heard a lot about Robert's Rebellion, but then only see things on either side of it and have to sort of contextualize what's in the middle there. So yeah, very happy to see a Baratheon, Baratheon house is strong, that somebody's sitting in Storm's End who has a sense of humor.
Yep.
And seems to vaguely know his history. I felt like 4,000 years ago was enough of a non sequitur that I was safe to Google that as a call me, but that seems to be just like the Andals conquering the area.
When the Andals showed up to Westeros for the first time.
So that'd be like the beginning of the current Westerosi history as far as they're concerned.
Sort of the first, and I believe it was the Andals that brought over the religion, the religion of the Seven.
Yes.
Right. Because we have the Andals and then we have the First Men. The First Men were, related to the children of the forest, and they were sort of there beforehand, right? The more indigenous people of Westeros, and the Andals were the ones that came over first from Essos. So basically the first white people that showed up to this continent, if you want to put it in more of our real world terms. So yeah, and I guess this is what we're celebrating here at Ashford. I don't necessarily remember that from the books. That may be a little bit of an add-on. But I like it as a little bit of lore.
How much do I need to pay attention to the fact that House Baratheon has put 100 gold on whoever beats him That seems like just like yeah, obviously whoever beats you is going to have like a lot of wealth. That seems like a nothing, right?
I do think, I mean, I don't know if this is specifically important, but I do think it is part of this whole tourney process, which is that these knights all show up and it is basically a huge dick measuring contest between these houses. And it also is about the ability, and I think we see this in Dunk's conversation with Stefan Fossaway as they're walking, and he's like, who are you going to challenge? You know, and Dunk's like, it kind of doesn't matter to me who I challenge. And Stefan's like, well, you know, it does actually kind of matter. This is how knights sort of level up, right? In their prestige in Westeros, right? This is how you make a name for yourself: is you show up to a tournament, you're not a famous knight, you defeat a famous knight, and all of a sudden you're somebody, right? I think the most famous one from the Game of Thrones era is Sir Barristan Selmy, who defeats someone named Sir Duncan the Tall much later in his life. When he was 16, and all of a sudden becomes Sir Barristan Selmy, who eventually becomes the Lord of the Kingsguard. And, you know, those are like the moments that knights, as they're coming up, really dream of, right? Or squires dream of as they become knights. And that knights from lower houses look for, right? So like if you're somebody from even like a Fossaway, right? Or a Dondarrion, even those are slightly smaller houses than a Baratheon. You may be the kind of person who would challenge the Laughing Storm, because beating Sir Lionel would be a huge win for you, and would be a big win for your house as well, to be like, we took on the Baratheons and defeated them at the tourney. Because, you know, again, you're not defeating anybody in war at the moment, so the tourney's the best shot you're going to get.
Okay, and like, is the tournament like a bracket, or is a series of like placements and challenges? So like, let's say I enter a tournament and I win my first placement by the grace of one of the seven gods, and then I'm just like, cool, can I like cash out my chips? Can I be like, this is my armor, and just leave? Yeah, like I don't need to win everything.
You could enter the tournament and you walk up and challenge, you know, you pick one of the other knights and you challenge them, you defeat them. I think you could just cash out at that point. But that might look bad, right? That might make you look like a bit of a coward. They may want you to keep, I think they want you to keep going until there's sort of one man standing at the end, or until the big final fray, or, you know, I think each tournament has its own sort of different series of events. And the Lord that's putting it on, so Lord Ashford's probably got his own plan for what he wants his marquee matchups to be at the end, sort of thing.
There's like a programming aspect to it. Good. That means and that sounds like,
and you or Dunk, as like a hedge knight, if he gets in, wouldn't necessarily just walk up to like the biggest knight, right? Like he's not going to walk up to one of the Targaryen princes and just be like, I challenge you. That would be maybe too far of a jump for him. He would want to challenge one of the lesser knights first.
Yeah, but it is a series of challenges, and who dictate, like the Lord, you're saying, programs.
The Lord programs it, and then the knights themselves challenge each other, right? Like, you know, they have their own little rivalries that they're dealing with.
I'm excited to see that process too. Maybe I'll learn something about medieval contests and tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that this show has enough time to get into the minutia, which I think will be fun.
I do want to sort of track some of these houses as more and more of them get added, because it looks like we're going to have a lot. But before I do, I want to make sure, is it possible that somebody from these houses shows up just to watch? Or if we see the house here, do we assume they have a knight in the tournament?
If we see a tent, I think it's because they're definitely going to have a knight, but there are going to be a lot of lords and ladies and whatnot who just show up to watch. But if they're throwing up a tent, I am going to assume that they have a knight. I would say. And
Cool.
also, just having read the book, most of the recognizable houses that we're going to see, they're bringing at least one knight because, why wouldn't you at that point? Because as we see in this episode, as the working ladies describe, the difference between a hedge knight and a landed knight is that a landed knight is sworn to a house. A lord has taken them into their service. So these, even if the house, doesn't, like, the lord isn't going to fight, right? Like Sir Lionel is obviously a lord and a fighter. But if he didn't want to fight, he could have Baratheon knights fight for him, and on behalf of his house.
Cool. All right, so we have a Sir Lionel for the Baratheons. We know that's at least happening.
Mm-hmm. The Laughing Storm.
As the Laughing Storm. House Dondarrion, what's his face?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, House Dondarrion being a bunch of redheads and making the world redhead. I kind of like that joke. That was not the first thing I noticed about Beric Dondarrion because of, I don't know, the one eye and the flaming sword and the coming back from the dead.
Yeah.
But definitely a redhead. Good to know. That they're keeping that recessive gene alive. And then I do have a question for you, Neil. Why is one of the working girls going through a funeral setup when Dunk walks into the tent?
I think that's just like a like a role play thing.
Like a sex thing?
Maybe. Like they're putting
Cool.
on a little role play scenario for somebody.
Yeah. Great. Last time we mixed a funeral setting and sex, the fandom went fucking apeshit. Can't wait.
Yeah. Like somebody's got a weird kink in that camp, and maybe it's a Dondarrion. Who knows? That guy seems
weird kink and
like a weird little douchebag. So
do we think he's actually fighting?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. And then we have House Fossaway for sure that is fighting because we see what's his face training with the big red apple on his shield.
Sir Stefan is the knight, and Sir Raymond and Raymond is his cousin and squire, and Raymond is the one who is nice to Dunk, and Stefan's the dick.
Nice. All right. So other houses. I believe I saw some lion heads behind the Dondarrion tent, so that would suggest that House Lannister is around.
And we are in the Reach, so this is very close. Not super close to Lannisport, but it is sort of in their general area in the south.
And it is the Reach, so they'd be swearing fealty to House Tyrell, which means I'm guessing a House Tyrell will have representation here
We're
in
gonna be
Ashford.
looking for some Tyrells for sure.
Looks like there's a Beesbury flag, which I was only on the lookout thanks to last week's Storm section, but it appears we're gonna get some bees.
Get some beehives, baby.
And then I'm going to assume the Targaryens are also here, not because I saw any of their flags, but because I did see, which I believe to be a Darren, but I'm going to say for sure a Targaryen in this episode, as our drunk blonde gentleman pays with a three-headed dragon gold piece, which is insane. Also, what a way to remind us about a certain saying about Targaryens and flipping a coin. But I assume they're also going to be at the tourney just because they seem like big dicks. And why would the king not have his house at the every tournament?
Well, here's what I'll say in the column. One, always good to be tracking the blondes because they are very unique in this world. And two, as we know, up until Robert's Rebellion, which isn't for another 80 some years, the Targaryens still very much in charge. Even though things look pretty bleak in the time of House of the Dragon, they still come out of that sitting on the throne. So the blondes are still very much in power, and there are going to be plenty of them to deal with here. So you are doing a good job tracking the blondes, but I'm not going to confirm nor deny who that is in the inn. But I think his dragon coin is a pretty big sign.
Yeah, I think the dragon coin is why I was able to bring it up in the column, but I do have more
Yeah.
storm questions.
Slightly
when
less subtle
we
here
get
in the
there.
show than it is in the book. I will say that.
I really love our leads here. Peter Claffey, I think, is doing as Sir Dunk, doing a great job.
Very charming.
At just immediately, I'm on the side of this character, this sort of like lovable oaf. I am very worried about him getting hurt, but also he is huge, so hopefully that isn't a huge problem for me. But also Dexter Soul Ansel, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, who is playing Egg, also has that sort of spark where as soon as I see him pretending to be a knight, I'm like, oh my god, let that kid join you. And luckily, eventually he does. So I really appreciate those characters and can't wait to see how they go forth. I love the economy, basically, where we get 2 scenes with Egg. 3 if you count the falling asleep is different from the scene by the fire. And I already have like invested a lot in this child and get how he makes Dunk slightly better, even though he's smarter and smaller. They both appear to have at least I'm gonna say open heart, if not a big heart. I don't know that much about Egg, but he does seem at least willing to do this. And despite being knowledgeable, he's willing to leave that in pretty fast and follow Dunk to the tournament. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think they've done a really good job of establishing several things about their dynamic. One, that Egg obviously has more book knowledge than Dunk.
Yes.
For whatever reason, Egg definitely is the brains of the operation.
Literate.
He's significant.
But,
we have
I'll
yet to see him read
something on screen.
But I would say if you were to guess which one of these guys is literate, it's more likely to be Egg. And then you also sort of get to see, especially in that fireside scene, sort of why Dunk would be drawn to maybe taking this kid under his wing, right? And when he first meets him, he's like, "Oh, are you an orphan?" Right? And they talk about how Dunk was an orphan, and this idea that maybe they're just 2 lonely souls out here traveling, and that's one of the reasons why Dunk would let him stay, begrudgingly let him stay, despite the fact that whether Dunk swore an oath or was knighted by Sir Arlen or not, he still seems to have a lot to learn about being a knight and making his way in this world.
One more question before I think we're almost ready to move into the storm. But when Dunk is finally talking to the Dundarian, he's like, "My Sir Arlen served your father, I believe, in Dorne fighting the Vulture King." Vulture King sounds cool. Do I need to know anything about him?
I mean, not necessarily. This is a Dornish thing, in that there was a legendary way back in right after the death of Aegon the Conqueror. There was this legendary outlaw, Dornish outlaw, in the Red Mountains. The Red Mountains are actually not that far from where we are in Ashford, and the Red Mountains are what separate Dorne from the Reach. And the Vulture King was sort of this outlaw that that attacked House Targaryen and was fighting on the side of the Dornish during the First Dornish War, and was sort of notably very good at killing Targaryen armies. And that was a long time ago. But what happened is that over the years, there were many rebel and outlaw bands in the Red Mountains that would take up the mantle of the Vulture Kings.
Oh, it's like a Dread Pirate Roberts.
Sort of like a Dread Pirate Roberts situation. So yes, Dunk probably encountered a Vulture King, but not necessarily the Vulture King, because the Vulture King was like 140 years ago at this point. So it was like, basically some sort of rebellion that House Dondarrion had to put down in the Red Mountains, because that's where House Dondarrion is. It's right there on the borders with Dorne. So yeah, would have been some Dornish rebels, and this is in a time of peace where the Targaryen, where the Seven Kingdoms are not necessarily fighting with Dorne. I believe Dorne has already been brought into the Seven Kingdoms, and I believe the current queen consort is Dornish. And so, like, it's a time of general peace, but there still are some Dornish who aren't quite happy about it. I mean, we get to all the way to the Game of Thrones era, and there's still some Dornish who aren't super excited about being part of the Seven Kingdoms. So that's that. I don't think is necessarily super important, other than being a fun bit of lore. There was one other thing you wanted to talk about here in the notes: the play.
Oh yeah, the Mummers play. That I forgot. That was the other lore question I had. Was this woman who's narrating the Mummers play with the dragon seems to be that she's going to be very important. But I was wondering if we could talk about in the column what the actual play was about.
Absolutely,
it's like a dude with a mirror shield.
Yeah, because this is an Age of Heroes story, which is ancient shit.
Okay.
And this is just sort of, and this I believe comes up in the Song of Ice and Fire books. Tyrion Lannister talks about it at one point. And it is about a man named Serwyn of the Mirror Shield. And he was a hero who once saved Princess Derissa from some giants. And he slew a dragon named Urax by approaching the beast from behind a polished shield, so that the dragon only saw its own reflection and never saw the knight himself. So he was able to sneak up on the dragon and stab it through the eye. And eventually Serwyn was haunted by all the ghosts of the knights he killed. So it's one of those Age of Heroes legends from the, I believe it's from the First Men, actually. So it's kind of cool. And it's said that Serwyn eventually became a Knight of the Kingsguard, and was a very important knight, specifically of the Reach, and served the kings of the Reach, who were obviously there before the Andals came over. So he's a local legend, Serwyn.
Nice. He's like the Perseus. That was the one who fought the Medusa with the mirror shield.
Sure, I haven't gotten around to the Odyssey yet.
Reading the Odyssey. Classics.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there before Christopher Nolan's movie comes out.
You know what? You deal with the fictional legends of this world. I'll be the one that says this is the Perseus. And if I'm wrong, send the angry emails to stormofspoilers@gmail.com to me, not Neil. Neil told his myth correctly.
Yep.
Great. Love it. Why do you think they picked this? Just to have a dragon? Because the dragon's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the show obviously we're not set in a time of dragons. There are people who live in this time who remember the last dragon dying off, but there aren't actually any real dragons. So the Mummers play is a really good way for us to get a little bit of dragons, and for this show in its first episode to accomplish the Ian McShane rule of Game of Thrones, which is we needed some tits and we needed some dragons, and we got both.
Nice.
And we got some butt.
And we got some butt. I'm going to say the most relatable thing so far of the Hedge Knight, the episode of A Night of Seven Kingdoms, is having a crush on the drama girl. So I can't wait to see how this goes forward for Dunk. Hopefully he's able to
it helps that she's
keep his wits
tall,
about him.
Like he is, but yeah, obviously.
I mean, I don't know that. She's tall. She's on stage and he's
tall.
like in the back of the car. Okay, all right. Good to know. That's good. Tall girls, deserve tall men if they want. I don't know how to approach that topic. We'll approach that topic when it actually happens on the show. How about that? Until then, Neil, I think it's time to transition over to the storm.
I am the storm, brother. The first storm and the last. And you're in my way.
All right, it's the storm. unlike some shows where Neil and I get screeners, this is based entirely on Neil's book knowledge and, thank you, HBO, the weeks ahead trailer as to what is actually going to be in this season. So I have one main question about Darren, who I swear that's Darren.
Yeah, 100% nailed it. That is definitely Darren.
When Darren's like, I dreamed of you, Targaryens who dream, I know about that from another series. Is he a dreamer? And if so, why is it important that he dreamed of Dunk?
It's very important. And he is very much a dreamer. And he is one of the famous Targaryen dreamers. Although Darren notably is one of the more famous drunken Targaryen dreamers. So whether or not we can trust his dreams is another thing entirely. That said, this dream has a very specific outcome in this story, and it's a pretty major spoiler. So
in this season?
In this season. And I actually don't think I'm going to tell you the entire thing because it's really good. It's a really good twist. But I will tell you the dream so that you can kind of keep a lookout for what it would be. So Darren's dream,
is why we're here.
Which he will eventually tell us, is that he dreams of Dunk, and he dreams of a great dragon that falls on Dunk and dies, but that the knight walks away alive. So that's his dream, is that a dragon falls on Dunk and dies, but Dunk lives. Now, we know that there aren't actual dragons in this story.
Right.
But plenty of metaphorical dragons. So we'll see if any of them fall on Dunk. I
like that.
And so, yeah, so Darren is here. He is, for those who are tracking the family tree, he is Egg's older brother.
We were debating on whether or not we could add a Catelyn Stark Memorial Ironic Statement Award. This, of course, comes from Catelyn Stark, who says, Walder Frey would never harm me. Very wrong. These usually go in the storm for obvious reasons and won't come from me, as I am just getting my hands around what this story is going to be. But Neil, what is the Catelyn Stark Memorial Ironic Statement sort of based on Darren here in this beginning?
Well, it comes from our spitooning master of games himself when he says there are princes about. Because not only is Darren here, but there's another little prince running around without his hair that we have not yet. And what's interesting is I think I have been very curious as to how long the show is going to wait. Because I was always sort of struck by how quickly the novella pulls the hood off of the Egg situation and reveals who Egg is. I honestly think that it is something that could happen as early as like the end of the second episode. We'll know, because as we see in the Weeks Ahead trailer, there is this conflict moment that involves the Mummer girl and the other prince that we have not yet met, the other brother. And it's, I believe, at that moment where we first learn what's going on with Egg. And so, like, that's going to come up pretty quickly. So that's either going to be next week or the week after.
Does the other brother go to the Mummer show because Egg's at the Mummer show? Like, is it sort of Egg's fault that... Okay.
He's just there. He's going to show up to the party eventually. He's there for the tourney.
Right. I mean, his armor looks really cool.
His armor is really cool.
So I hope, I don't think Dunk gets to go into season 2 with flame-headed armor. That doesn't seem in character for him. Actually, the funniest thing is that all throughout all throughout the episode, I was like, Dunk just reminds me of the animated character Kay in the 60s Disney's Sword in the Stone.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of like knight that Wart is squiring to. And then in the Weeks Ahead trailer, we see Dunk with his helmet on, and he has the same helmet style as Kay. Mm-hmm. So I do appreciate that. And I'm pretty sure Brian Cogman, writer for Game of Thrones, huge animated Sword in the Stone fan, is also appreciating how much live action K we're getting.
Hell yeah.
But that being said, there is. It's why is everybody fighting each other? My understanding of a tournament is where we were just going to be jousting, and because I've seen jousting tournaments on Game of Thrones, but in the weeks ahead trailer, there seems to be something that looks more like a behind Jon Snow battle scene where we're fighting a lot of people in like a gray background.
Well, did you catch the mention of a trial by combat?
Yes.
Okay. So obviously, and what's interesting about this week's ahead trailer, I think, is that we get a lot of the plot of what's about to happen here. We don't get anything about Egg, which I think is, the show just sort of, not showing its hand as to its like one sort of twist, right? Except you will notice that in some of the scenes where Dunk and Egg are walking around the camp, Egg has his hood up, obviously trying to be a little bit incognito. I thought that was interesting. But it does show quite a lot of the plot of what happens with Dunk, where obviously we have an incident with the mummers play. He punches the prince in the face. The prince obviously gets very mad and does what princes do, wants to execute him in many ways. And then eventually a trial by combat is called for. Now, what's great about this is that it is not quite the same as the trial by combat that we're used to from in Game of Thrones with the Mountain and the Red Viper, where it was a 1v1. This is a trial of the 7, which is a 7-on-7.
Oh.
So there's several elements to this that are going to be important, which means Dunk is going to have to recruit 6 other knights to fight alongside him and defend his honor.
Oh, fun.
And the prince also gets to pick 6 other knights to fight alongside him. And it's a massive melee that starts with a joust and becomes a melee. And it is until either one side yields or dies.
All right, so that's the climax. We're building like we're doing the tournament, but we're actually going to go into this trial of the 7.
Yeah.
Cool.
And a trial by 7, what's great about it, and I think they even hint at this in the trailer, which is like the trial of the 7 is like an escalation beyond the tourney. The tourney, the goal is not to kill everybody in the tourney, right? It's to just make your opponent yield, and you're not even necessarily using your most deadly weapons, whereas the trial of the 7 is a little bit more serious and involves actually trying to kill each other.
Yeah, and it looks like that's going to be pretty tough on Dunk, at least in the weeks ahead trailer, as that's he goes through it.
And that's the thing is like, what's really interesting is they're starting with this much lighter tone, but that part gets really gnarly. Like that's going to feel like a real Battle of the Bastards light version for this series. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how they navigate us from here to there and get us to what I assume is going to be the finale, because it's kind of where the story ends, is like right after the trial of the 7. So I don't even think that's going to be like a penultimate episode thing. This may be like an episode 6 big ass fight thing, but we'll see.
Nice. We got a question on Spotify from Ethan that said, are you going to talk about the Blackfire rebellions? I don't know why. Neil, clarify this for me.
Sure. So the answer, I think, is yes. And it actually seems to be answered by this week's ahead trailer, which is we see in some of the flashbacks in the week's ahead trailer, a young Dunk out in the middle of the aftermath of some kind of battle, taking shoes off of a horse, right? In the beginning of this trailer. And he's right outside of King's Landing. And this could very well be the aftermath of a massive battle from the Blackfire Rebellion that was the Battle of the Redgrass Field, which the Blackfire Rebellions were basically started by some Targaryen bastards right? So the current
Okay.
king, Darren the second, Darren the Good, his father, Aegon the Fourth, who was Aegon the Unworthy, who was a real shithead. Before he became king, because he was like way down the line, and it took like his uncle being king and then dying after a year, and then his father being king and then dying fairly quickly for him to become king. And then he was a real dick. And he clashed with our current king, Darren the Good, because he was terrible and corrupt, and he also had a bunch of bastards, and they were Blackfires. And one of these Blackfires started a rebellion, and this rebellion eventually got up to King's Landing, and it concluded with this massive battle that was ultimately won by two of the characters that feature in this story, who we've yet to meet. So we've met some of the princes, right? We've met Egg, we've met Darren, but we have not met their father Maekar, who we will meet, and we have not met their uncle Baelor, who we will also meet in this story. They feature very prominently. They are the prince. The Baelor is the Prince of Dragonstone, so he's next in line to inherit the throne. Maekar is the Prince of Summerhall, who's like second in line, basically. And they are the brothers and sons of the current king. And they are the two who, with their Baelor shows up with a host of Dornishmen, and Maekar shows up with his own army, and they do this move called the Hammer and the Anvil, and they smashed the rebellion right outside King's Landing. So I actually think that is Dunk picking the remains of the Battle of Redgrass Field. And I think that we may get some of that lore, which is really fun because doesn't really feature in the book at all, but it is obviously timely and relevant, especially because we're going to meet the characters who are very important in ending that conflict. And I mean, there are several over the course of the Targaryen histories, especially between the time of House of the Dragon, the Dance of Dragons War, and Robert's Rebellion. I believe there are multiple Blackfire rebellions, and it's usually just like Targaryen bastards who are like, no, I want to be king. And then the, more natural born Targaryens have to be like, all right, now I have to kill you, half brother. So in those scenes that we assume are going to be a flashback, he's talking to somebody. Do I need to know, or do you know who that character is? I don't know. I mean, my initial gut reaction was maybe that's his mother, but we don't really know. That could just be someone he knows. I mean, Dunk's from Flea Bottom. He's an orphan. And we don't really get a whole lot of his backstory, especially in this first book. So I don't necessarily think I know. So it could be a family member, could just be a friend. But hopefully we get that answer. And again, I think that's one of the fun parts that this show is going to be able to work with, which is that, they can fill in some of the gaps with these flashbacks.
It looks like we're going to spend some more time with Lionel in a tug of war competition. Which leads me now to my question here for the storm, which is loving Lionel. I do think he's going to be the one who vouches for Dunk. You don't have to say that one way or the other.
Sure.
But the question I do have for you is, given that I like Lionel so much, is he going to be placed against Dunk in some sort of joust before like the big fight? Is it going to be like, sorry, friend, I have to beat you?
Oh, Lionel's friendly. He's great. We love Lionel.
Oh, okay.
Lionel is on the team. And I think that the Laughing Storm is good fun. And I think he's going to continue to be good fun. This tug of war thing, I believe, is extra. I don't remember this from the book necessarily, and this is another thing that I think they're going to add is some of the build up to the actual games and the build up to like adding in some additional moments for Dunk to have before the actual fighting starts is places where they will pad the plot a little bit, because again, there's not a whole lot of plot to go here, because like once we have the incident in the mummer's tent where he punches the prince, it's pretty much now we have to do this trial of the seven, and that's the whole thing.
Who's the guy who doesn't remember him? He's like asking somebody else if he remembers him from a thing. And it's like, I don't remember you, and he has some weird breastplate on.
I couldn't make out his sigil. I assume that's one of the other knights, but couldn't quite make him out just yet.
Okay, so we don't know necessarily if he's important yet.
Just yet. I'm sure he's from a notable house, but couldn't. He's wearing too much armor over his tunic.
And then we have Tansel, who is our romantic lead.
Mm-hmm.
Too tall, as we learn in, which I think is pretty great. As you were saying, that looks like, the key plot. Like once that sort of like punch happens, we're sort of off to the races. So I would assume next week we get to talk to Tansel.
Oh yeah,
a little bit more. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I would think so, because it looks like next week they're going to continue to be roaming around the camp looking for someone to vouch for Dunk, and he's going to do a little bit of flirting now that he has his wingman, his tiny wingman with him. Maybe it'll go a little bit better. And Tansel's cool. She's obviously she's got they're putting on a really cool play. I love the production design of the dragon, and she's got good stage presence. And again, she is tall, described in the book as half a head shorter than Dunk, who in the books eventually is measured as 6'11". So she's like 6'5" at least.
Yeah, that's pretty tall.
She's a tall lady. So
I'm interested to see this. I do want a little bit more padding. I guess unless you really need to, we'll wait another week to see if we either get to if we even get to the tournament, because like I guess that's just now occurring to me. We might not. Dunk may not make it long enough without punching a royalty before he even gets to be in the tournament at all. So I guess we will find out that. I'm very happy that you've already told me that.
My guess is that we won't even get any tourney stuff starting until like the third episode at the earliest. Because I do think the tourney starts before the thing happens in the mummer's tent. Like I think that happens like, if I recall correctly, like the first night after the first night of games. Because the prince, the shitty prince, Arian, definitely shows up for the first day of games, and has some tourney action before he goes to the mummer's play. So like we're gonna see him do some tourney stuff to set the stage for his character. So there is some tourney action before that, at least in the chronology of the book.
Got it. So we need things we need to get done. We need some tourney action. We need to talk to Tansel. We need to figure out Egg's true lineage. And then we need to get to the inciting incident that gets us to the trial of the seven, which we think is going to be the climax of the series. I would be just happy if we spend the extra plot in between those things just introducing me to 6 knights on each side.
Sure. We got to meet all these knights. We have Dunk still has to figure out how he's going to get armor for this whole thing. That's a significant part of the plot. We've got to meet a blacksmith, who is a pretty significant character in the story. And along the way, again, I think he's going to have to meet. We got significant number of blonde princes to meet at this point, including the 2 older princes. Like I said, those are 2 very important characters that come along after we meet all of their shitty children.
Nice. And then you have been, you've set the game for me that one of the Targaryens in the story famously dies later after drinking wildfire. I only think I see 2 Targaryens in this episode, and of the 2, it would definitely be Darren the drunk one.
He does like drinking.
Yeah, I guess that's my best guess, but I'm guessing I haven't met my Targaryen madman quite yet.
I'm gonna wait to give you the answer until we've met them all, because I think it's important the context to meet all, I think, 5 of the Targaryens in this story before you really truly can make this distinction.
Well, I like it. I like the world. I like the tone. And right when I thought it was going to get too prequel-y because the Game of Thrones theme started playing, I immediately cut to taking a shit. I think we're really smart. I think the Mummers play is something new. It wasn't about Rhaenyra or anything like that. So I really enjoy this mid-quel, prequel.
Sure. Well, I think
sequel to the prequel.
What's interesting about this is, yes, it is a prequel, but it's more about the building of a legend that exists for the characters that we've already met later. It's not necessarily about setting, like we talk about the Dondarrion guy that we meet here being maybe the grandfather of Beric Dondarrion, but like he doesn't know that. That's not ever going to factor into his life, and no one's going to care. But Sir Duncan the Tall is a significant presence for the people that come after, and obviously Egg is a very important dude much later in life. So it's fun. I think it's the most fun kind of prequel because it's not really beholden to any of the story beats or elements of Game of Thrones. It's also not super beholden to anything that's happening in House of the Dragon because it's far enough away to where it's like, yes, the current king, Darren, the second is like the great grandchild of Rhaenyra, but like there's so much shit has happened since then that like people will in this world would talk about the Dance of Dragons like it's ancient history, even though it was a couple generations ago. So we may not even get a ton of talk about that either. So it's great. It's sort of like perfectly placed to where it can be its own story.
I like it. I'm also very happy here in the land of Westeros that it does look like, thanks to the nature of a tournament, we're going to be getting some delicious looking food, be it gigantic fowl legs being roasted or cute little pies.
Yeah, I bet George is loving that, man. He probably showed up on set, saw all that food, and was like, "This is my dream.
Yes, this is what I want.
I want to live here." You can see why he likes Ira Parker more than Ryan Condal.
Well, I'm hoping that we get more food, but probably has nothing to do with next week's episode title, Hard Salt Beef. But also hard soft beef doesn't sound like nearly as appetizing as anything we see eaten this week.
Although a staple food of Hedge Nights.
Good. I mean, Hedge Nights, just like normal nights, but sadder. Is there anything I need to know before we let everybody go and rejoin us next Monday for Hard Soft Beef?
Just keep an eye out for more blondes, and we're off to the races, and we're having good fun with Dunk and Egg. I'm very excited.